Hello, I believe we are now live.
Hello.
All right, everybody. All right, we've got some people here talking already. Good to be here. This is actually the first episode of the Block Insider series that we're doing. So I think the times need no introduction of where we are and what's happening, even though, interesting enough, it's very different in each part of the world. But there have been a lot of questions on how projects are handling the turmoil, how we're getting through the challenges, what are core teams doing to help support these protocols while we're obviously facing challenges. So we've got a great group of people here and some different perspectives, both from project builder perspective, from perspective of validators, perspective of investors, and we're going to get into it. Okay, so please, if you have questions, let us know and put them over in the chat, and we'll be getting to those later. And just so everyone has a little framework of how we're going to talk, what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to start off with talking about what are the challenges and kind of be transparent about the things we're all dealing with as we have been pushing through. And hey, the projects are no different. Everybody, no matter what your job is dealing with adversity. But we're going to give some insight into our perspective. Then we're going to talk about, hey, what are the good things about this? What's the silver lining? How are we pushing through? What are some things that, in light of obviously negative things, what things are actually positive that we can pull out of this in light of the time? So we're going to get into that. And then, hey, it's potentially a different world we're living in. We've got some people here with phenomenal perspectives, and we're going to get into what does the next 12 months look like, considering what the current state of the world. So we also have some unique geographical perspectives. We've got some representation from San Francisco, from the New York tri-state area, and from Korea. So we'll be getting into that. So let's kick off first with some introductions. I am Jack O'Halloran. I'm CEO of SKALE Labs. We support the SKALE network. And I will leave it now. The panelists, please. I will be moderating today, and our panelists are going to be giving intros. And so please, Nick, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. So, hey guys, this is Nick. I'm head of research at Terra, which is a stablecoin network and fintech platform in South Korea. And yeah, glad to be here.
All right. Sunny, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Sunny. I'm a researcher at Tendermint, where we work primarily on the Cosmos project, building all sorts of different things, such as Tendermint Consensus, Cosmos SDK, IBC. And I also run a validator called Sika, and so kind of put on a little bit both of the developer hat and the validator hat. So get some nice perspectives from both sides.
Hi, this is Baek from Hash. We are a crypto venture fund mainly based in Korea and US. We are active investors in crypto, ranging from fintech to virtual world, and also active participant as a validator for our portfolios. Also investor of all three projects today.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Hey, it looks like we have some people saying we have audio issues. So I'm going to poll the group here. Colleagues like Connor and Darren are saying they're not hearing anything. So let's check in. Okay, we've got other people. Marcos can hear us. Okay, we've got audio. It sounds like we're live. Okay, good. Sorry for that interruption. By the way, on that, thanks for getting up at 5 a.m. Props to you. Good job. All right, we do have a global group here today, which is pretty amazing. People from around the world, and we're all connecting different time zones. So, all right, first question. So, panelists, can please tell me? Let's talk a little bit about the challenges. What has it been like at your project? What hardships have you faced, and what adversity are we kind of pushing through right now, or were you? Because I know we're at different times, at different places, and Baek, please feel free to touch base on things you're seeing across your various portfolio companies, and as opposed to being one specific project. So let's just go ahead. Whoever wants to take that one first.
Yeah, I can go ahead and get started maybe. Yeah, I mean, so for us, from like a work perspective, I would say things are, not super different. Mostly because at Tendermint, we've always been sort of very remote first, anyways. I mean, we do have some physical offices, but at least the one that our Berlin team, they used to go to the office much more often, and so I think maybe they had felt the effects a bit more. But especially our San Francisco and US teams, we had offices, but people would work from home, and we'd like all go to the office once a week, and so we did kind of lose out on that. But me myself, I actually just moved to New York like a couple of months ago, and so I was already sort of pretty remote from the rest of the team, anyways. And so I don't know, a couple of years of we've had some practice, so it's been kind of nice. But at the end of the day, still missing those like face to face interactions, and just sort of even the weekly the spontaneous discussions you get from working in person just don't happen on when you have to like set up a Zoom call to have a conversation. You don't get spontaneous conversations still.
Yeah, I definitely echo Sunny's points. And even during this decline productivity and the slowdown of economy due to COVID, I think the crypto industry is productivity and the growth are highest ever. And we're definitely seeing that within our portfolio as well. Another thing that I noticed that was interesting was that, as Sunny mentioned, many of the crypto projects are already remote. Like SKALE, you guys have extended team in Ukraine. Terra team is based in Seoul, NSF, and Sunny Tendermint with the Berlin office, and pretty much all over the place, right? And another thing that we noticed is that there was so much of a big taboo around treasury management of the crypto projects, coming from big ICOs and how they use money and how short of the runway they have compared to how much money they raise. So I think that awareness has been around for a while than any of other equity funded companies. So that when we checked in with the portfolios on some of the runways and how they're managing their treasury, it was actually better off than some of the average numbers that I was seeing from the Silicon Valley startups.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think for us as well, perhaps I think previously we were a bit less global and remote compared to Tendermint and Cosmos, but I would say that the virus has been very much an impetus for more and more of us working remote. We've onboarded several team members from different parts of the world, and usually we would have people to hang out with us in Seoul before fully kicking things off. But now things have been very smooth, having people join the team from different parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's get into workflows. And by the way, I'll give a little perspective on SKALE. So we, as Baek mentioned, we have 2/3 of our team is in Ukraine, but that team every single day is in the office together. Thankfully, our communication between the two teams is all remote, so zero impact there. But the San Francisco team is kind of maybe 3 days a week in the office, so not a major impact. But it's been interesting to see how so many people all of a sudden need to learn how to work from home. And I think regardless of what company you work for, if you work in tech, if you're in front of a computer or in a number of jobs, you become a work at home person. And so it's been interesting for us to see, we've been experimenting with, hey, should we do more online check-ins? Should we do more remote activities? And should we, for example, have a cooking class with the team because we never see each other anymore in person.
Mm-hmm.
So these things have been coming up for us. And we've been experimenting with them. I'm curious with any of your teams or portfolio companies, or even within the Hash team, which is a very functional company. If you think about the validators and investment and portfolio support, you guys have your own team. What are you doing what are you doing within your own teams to try to keep that collaborative component happening?
Yeah, so our team is similar to Terra in that most of our team members in Seoul. So internal communication has been mainly on my part, being remote in San Francisco. And I think Nicholas can also agree on this, but so Seoul has been pretty much back to normal. A lot of the companies have been working out of office. So no huddle on that side. Another thing that I'm noticing is that, crypto industry overall has been getting a lot of criticism around kind of open-ended networking and fancy, boozy networking events and conferences all over the world with everyone traveling together. Definitely that's gone during the March, and we've seen that cost going down for many of our portfolios and also within our team as well. As a global venture fund, we do travel a lot. Usually 1 week, about half of our team may be traveling somewhere. And now that we're not doing any of that, we actually feel that our conversations are more focused with purpose, and we are engaging with better quality with teams that we are building something tangible together.
So Jack, question. So you mentioned that you also, so the SKALE team is also, sort of half in Ukraine, half in San Francisco. So this is something I was thinking of, about, even pre-COVID, which is, I feel like when it comes to having remote teams, I feel like there's this, so like Tendermint also is kind of like this as well, where we kind of have one main team in San Francisco and one main team in Berlin and then one main team in Toronto. And I kind of felt that sometimes it's best to either have everyone in one spot or have everyone fully distributed. But I feel like having the multi-office situation where you have a team in San Francisco and a team in Berlin and a team in Toronto is actually the worst of both worlds, where what happens, because then you kind of get into a situation where it's easy to for discussions that happen like spontaneously. If you're completely distributed and remote, basically all discussions have to be done in some sort of online legible way, whether it's on Slack or GitHub. But when you have these offices, you have people in San Francisco are talking about things, and maybe that doesn't always get recorded, and you get this sort of things getting out of sync. Did you ever feel that with your team?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it gets back to having a real remote culture between groups. You're either fully remote, everyone's constantly working remotely, which then it's obvious everyone has to embrace certain tactics, or for half the people you deal with, you're in person, the other half aren't. And so we very early on, one thing that I think a best practice that I learned in other companies where I had to deal with that was, and I can say we didn't always do this perfectly, and so I wanted to make sure we did it better at SKALE for the SKALE core team. There's no main office. All offices are equal. It's not like if you're at headquarters, you're this select group of people, and then if not, you're second class citizen, and so that happens all the time with Silicon Valley companies, right? You get this kind of ivory tower Silicon Valley thing happening. We wanted to make sure that wasn't part of the culture, so we try to make sure everybody is. It doesn't matter if you're in the Kharkiv office or San Francisco office. There's one company, and then you just embrace other tactics and methods. And the reality is that for the San Francisco office, we get up early, and then the Kharkiv office stays up late, and then a lot of these things that we've been doing now, I think all these other companies around the world have to do just to connect to their own colleagues, which it sounds like Cosmos is doing very well because of the nature of how you work. And it sounds like at Terra, you guys are doing that from the Seoul office, working with your participant, your project and your community outside of Seoul, right?
Yeah, so as I was saying, I think it's a bit of a mixed situation where in the beginning we had to sort of accommodate being much more remote and global, and we've had several team members join from different parts of the world. Now, Korea did an excellent job at tracing the virus, testing, I think, several billions of people. And now things are, I'd say, 95% back to normal. People mostly go normally back to work. And so, yeah, I would say actually for me personally, the transition from remote to back to the office has definitely been, you sort of see the contracts quite starkly, in the sense that on the one hand, you do get more exposed to the serendipitous discussions and everything. Things are a bit less structured, but at the same time, I have noticed that focus can definitely diverge more.
Hmm.
You tend to be more focused when you're.
I think that. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was my point.
Yeah. So hey, I think that's a good segue into the next topic here. Is let's talk about developers and let's talk about validators, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just kind of lead this off to say, it's been amazing to see how much action's happening when you take an entire group of people who work in front of computers, like all of us, right? And we're all stuck at home. There's a lot of work that happens. And so I'll just open it up and see if anyone wants to comment on, have you seen a shift in action and development? And, and as Baek said, we're not traveling around the world anymore also. So wondering what things you've seen that you can share with all the people listening today from an insider perspective, what's happening both on a development and validator perspective.
Yeah, sure. So, from the Cosmos side, this sort of, I guess everyone having to be sort of indoors and on their computer help us, probably get IBC out the door a bit faster. And so, this past month, we just sort of like the past 2 months, we sort of just ground out a lot of the things and got that to a point where it's ready to sort of launch the next steps to launch Game of Zones. Yeah, and then from the validator perspective, I'm not sure if too much is sort of that different. Most of the validator operations we can do remotely. Like, we have physical servers and data centers, but we have like systems for like, just operating those remotely and stuff. So that's never been too much of a concern. And like the data center that we're using still has like, it still has like physical security and stuff. And they haven't really let it's an essential service, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure from the validator side too much has changed. I don't know, Baek, if you have any ideas of like things that are big changes.
On the validator side, I think it's not much change because I see that whenever I get on a governance call with Terra or in SKALE, it's that the teams that are coming onto those calls are usually already virtual and global. Mm-hmm. So I think they're very used to it, and their business models are actually, I think it's very interesting, the POS validator business, because it's allowing for a new way of income for a lot of the participants into the network by staking or participating or contributing to the development. That this is something that might fuel the Web3 paradigm of how people can actually work. Right nowadays, people, when they think about work, they think of working for corporations, but, with the validator business, becoming more mature, people could think of, working for protocol as also work. So I think these changes and this abnormal environments are accelerating that change.
Mm-hmm. I would say, honestly, funny enough, I think one of the biggest changes to like work culture is that every video call you have has like an obligatory 5-minute COVID discussion at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. It's true. Well, hey, so one of the reasons why we're talking about this is I think it's reassuring to people, and it's people are wondering, and everyone wonders what's going on with other projects, and we've got a good look here into 3 plus all Baek's perspective. Sounds like people are plugging away. It's not business as normal, but it's business as optimized as it can be. And in some places, it's almost business as normal, right? And so,
yeah, well, I think that for the crypto native type of person, even more so than the millennial generation that generally is very tech savvy, I think we basically live with our computers, right? So, whether or not we, are at the office or not, I think there's sort of quite a big difference between, say, a doctor or a lawyer, where the office is sort of an establishment where, most of the work has to happen there, and it's quite hard to completely disappear from the office. I think for us, it's basically us and our computer, and then interactions definitely become virtual, but I think that's something that it's sort of more natural, and yeah, my guess is the transition is smoother compared to more traditional workplaces.
Yep. Go ahead, Baek.
Another thing that I wanted to note that I like is that due to this and due to absence of this physical interactions of this industry, a lot of things are becoming quantitative on how teams promote their growth, or the developers promoting some of the engagement. So I really like that change, which was, I thought, lacking compared to what I've seen in previous world where I was a software engineer for Amazon. And when you track these metrics, those were a lot of times absent, but now those are coming in as a more tangible discussion topics.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting topic. It sounds like when we take a step back, you can see core teams are saying, "Hey, we're getting the job done. We were shaken, but hey, we're back to doing our job. But we still have to interact with the outside world. And we can't go see people." So maybe everyone could share a little bit about how your strategies are changing, whether it be developer relations, whether it be go to market from a customer perspective of entities, businesses, projects using your service. Like, how are things changing in light of the fact that we can't physically go out and communicate? And wondering what all of you could share about how your strategies are shifting. And yeah.
I think, as a researcher, I think like one of the things that's really missing is like, it's harder to keep up with what's going on in other projects. I feel like, it's pretty easy to keep track of what's going on in Cosmos remotely because, I know all the input sources. But like, when I want to keep up with Ethereum like ETH 2.0 development, for example, like normally, the best way to sort of like catch up and like resync to that is like just by having someone you talk to. Like for example, in New York, I'm pretty good friends with Jacob Arlick. He's like one of the main developers of Tezos, and we would hang out like once a week or something, and from that I would just always be updated. Oh, like this is what's going on in Tezos land, and here's some cool ideas that we should import into Cosmos, and I have some cool ideas he like brings back to the Tezos community. And I think that sort of cross community pollination is really what's not been happening as much. And so I'm not sure what a great solution for that is. I think like sort of maybe like events like these, but I think even this is sort of a bit too formal. We need to recreate sort of just the casual hangout between like blockchain people who are friends and just want to hang out. And so figuring out how to like recreate that. I mean, House Party has been pretty good at that. I've just been hanging out with people on House Party. Talk with Alec Messmage and Rick Burton and a lot of other people who are just hanging out there. So that's always nice. But it's not as many of the researchers who are on there, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by the way, that is a very cool thing about the blockchain space is you can take people who, from an outside perspective, might seem like they're total competitors, but everybody's pushing towards a mutual goal. And it's almost co-opetition in a way, right? People are competing, but the TAM we know is going to grow so immensely that there's so much good cross-pollination of ideas and friendships being formed. It's really unique.
Yeah. Also, like the crypto gossip isn't there as much, if you know what I mean. There's always like a little bit of like, getting to know like what's going on behind the scenes at other projects. And that just, that's what I guess is really not there when you don't have like in-person communication.
Yeah. So Nick, what and Terra, by the way, I have to say is one of the most impressive projects when it comes to actual execution and from like a business perspective of partnerships, contracts, and really showing usage. And you guys have done a phenomenal job. How is it impacting your go-to-market teams as far as those partnership and business growth efforts?
Good question. So I'd say it's sort of twofold. So when it comes to Korea go-to-market and growth within Korea, I'd say the impact has been quite low. So definitely when it comes to e-commerce usage in Korea, it's been a bit rocky, and we've seen actually that across the different merchants that use Terra and via Chai, which is the payments application that leverages Terra, I'd say that we've definitely seen variance in the impact, right? So for example, for offline, we've definitely seen a sizable hit. Less so now, but a few weeks back, definitely. Also definitely for leisure, hospitality. But then when it comes to your generic e-commerce, volumes actually went up, right? So observing the varied impact of the virus on different types of usage of Terra has been interesting. Also in terms of international expansion and in terms of go-to-market, I'd say in Korea things were not very much disrupted. Go-to-market in other jurisdictions, we're looking into launching several new markets, that definitely stalled a lot. So again, I think you see varied effect across markets, across products and services.
Interesting. Baek, how about you? What are you seeing from your view?
One thing that I wanted to add, that I kind of saw a future of how the money gets distributed was in Korea. So in US, people started posting about getting the $1,200 checks, right? And in Korea, with about 90% of the payments happening online, government actually forced the citizens to download the app and get the distribution from the app and pay from there. And they also actually minted virtual currency that is specific to certain counties. So the purpose of this is that due to COVID, the offline merchants are all dying, because all these restaurants and stores, the usage is going down. But through this system of digital currency and the location of where they can actually control the amount of money that's getting used for a certain purpose, which is not really the case in US, where it's straight check to your banking account through a tax return account, and you can't really check where it's getting used. So I thought these uses of digital currencies, we're seeing some of these first steps through centralized forms.
It's very cool. Very cool. Well, I think we're definitely seeing, especially in the last week or so, I feel like there's a broadened awareness of the value of cryptocurrencies and blockchains. It just seems like people whom I would not normally be commenting on these things are saying, "Hey, there's value here," and there's curiosity that wasn't there before. So one other thing about this,
the cause of that, what are people getting interested in? Like for me, what I see is that I think for the people who are already, I think watching my Twitter feed, it feels like the people who are already Bitcoin believers are like, oh look, money printer go, blah, this is good for Bitcoin. But I'm not sure if I really have seen that from any of my friends who are not already into crypto.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing from my personal lens of just my social media view is there seems to be this almost like, wow, we can fly to the moon now, but we're still 10 years away from that. Like these macro conditions are making people feel instability about fiat currencies and things that, let's be honest, hopefully they all stay stable as cryptocurrencies be, rise and show value in certain specific areas. But it seems like macro problems are driving interest and awareness where, I think we're still pretty far away from having any sort of global disruption of norms. But that's kind of my view.
That can definitely see it.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that I think the fact that there's been a lot of disruption in the financial sector, the fact that in particular central banks are increasing the money supply very rapidly, I think that's revived and intensified a lot of the narratives around store of value and anti-inflation and the importance of having neutral monetary policy. And I think it's being used on both sides of the table. So some people will say, hey, this is what Bitcoin has been waiting for. This is the end all be all. And, finally, Bitcoin will be able to prove its value. And then there's others who would say, Bitcoin failed because it dropped when the S&P dropped. And, this was the ultimate test and it failed it. And of course, truth is always in the middle, and there's no one there's no one test. But it's interesting to see how people will use the current situation to push forward with narratives and pull them one side or the other.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about decentralized finance. Let's talk about DeFi. I mean, what are we seeing? Like, do we feel like we've expedited some of the market advance, the user adoption here? Like, what changes do you think we're going to see in the next 12 months when it comes to DeFi?
I think it's an interesting discussion. I think that we definitely saw from the robustness and design standpoint that things were quite shaken. Last month in particular, when the entire crypto markets, market cap and prices dropped extremely dramatically. So I think for Bitcoin and Ethereum, it was one of the fastest drops in their history. Right? And so I think this rattled DeFi quite a lot with liquidations. Maker, Compound definitely faced trouble. And so I think actually in the maturation and growth and coming of age of DeFi, I think going through shocks like this is actually it's very important, and I think it can help strengthen the way those protocols are designed, and make us rethink our approaches to make sure that even for events which many would consider black swans, but actually that in itself is an interesting debate. Is this a black swan, or is this one of many white swans that are keep coming? Right? So questions are on that, and how do we build DeFi in our protocols in a way such that they're more robust? I think will be more active conversation moving forward.
So another question. People love talking about DeFi as this very hard to define broad thing. It's like decentralized finance. So let's get a little more specific. Like, where do we actually think we're going to see advancement? Okay, like what, especially in the new market condition. Like, is it in loans? Are we going to see a lot more loans and like unique collateralization structures? Like, is it in trading? Like, what do we've got some people that obviously are very deep in the space. Like, what are you guys seeing will be particularly catalyzed by new market conditions? Okay, that was a tough question. We don't have to.
So I'm not sure whether this is catalyzed by. I'm not sure what effect is going to, like, the current market conditions are going to have on this, but just my general sort of view on DeFi, where I wanted to go, at least. I don't know if that's where it is going to go. Is, I don't know. I never really bought into this like trustlessness aspect of DeFi. I think that trustlessness is not really. I think a lot of these protocols are like this whole requirement for like over collateralization and stuff. It's all like stems from this need for trustlessness. And I don't think that's really, the world isn't trustless. There exists trust in the world. And the goal of technology should be to leverage existing trust relationship, maybe use web of trust style techniques to make interactions that weren't possible before and now possible. So I think the purpose of DeFi is not trustlessness, but rather the openness and the transparency. And the openness, comes from, anyone can access it. Anyone can create a competitor. Anyone, it's not geo-locked by geographical boundaries. And then the transparency comes from this notion where, it's kind of funny where, so the transparency comes from like this 2008, I think one of the problems with 2008 was you had this like complex financial system that no one really sort of understood, and because it was so non-transparent, and you had like things that were like you had these weird financial instruments that were like side bets on other stuff, and then like the insurance companies that were supposed to be insuring this thing had the same asset on their own balance sheet, and like there's no transparency in the financial system. And that, I think, what turned what should have been a small pop into like a giant implosion. And I wonder if we're gonna get to, we don't know if if that's gonna happen like in this one, right? Like I still think we're in that small pop phase, and I think we'll, if I'm gonna bet, I'm gonna say, I'm not sure how much better the finance industry has gotten from 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure all the same stuff that happened 10 years ago is just waiting to implode again this time again. And so I'd be interested to see like, I think we need to see more transparency in DeFi. And I think that's what's really I think that's the real value proposition of DeFi personally.
One interesting thing you said there, you said a lot of interesting things, but one in particular is trustlessness, right? And thing is, and we have people here that are doing deep research in this space, right, on this call. And one of the things I want to ask about is it's really about aligning humans with the technology, right? And if people acted completely irrationally in masses, then blockchains wouldn't work. But they do, because that doesn't happen. So I don't know, as you're doing your research, and even as you're thinking about DeFi, I mean, do you think sometimes, what's your perspective? Like how do you take into consideration like the human element, right? And it's kind of a unique skill set, I think, especially people in both, Nick and Sunny, your positions.
I definitely agree with you, Jack. And I think one thing that's very interesting about DeFi also is that as we build up this financial stack, it also allows humans to take a stake in these systems. I think previously in the financial systems, people cannot really take a stake and grow together with the monetary system. Usually as it grows through the inflation, people get losing money on the fiat value that they're getting. But this time with the DeFi, through being part of the stakeholder of the network, you can actually grow together. I think that part is very new and attractive to many people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I, by the way, I love Sunny. I love how you think outside the box sometimes. You're, like, let's slash humans, but with egg throwing, like, right? So it's all about incentive alignment. And right. and Baek, you said that well too. Like, let's really think about the bigger. And I think that's what captures the masses, is like they can play a part. They are part of the story, right? And that's where decentralization comes together, or comes into the equation.
Yeah, we have a long way to go, but yeah, we're going there. It's still very heavy whale play in the DeFi, but the growth is happening. And if you look at the top 10 projects growth, it's been amazing. And some of the tools that are supporting them has been very impressive.
So Baek,
so hey, Nick, you guys are doing some interesting stuff in DeFi right now, right? Sorry. Nick, why don't you go, then Sunny?
Sunny, please go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go. Go ahead.
I think we were diving into something slightly different.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So Sunny, go ahead, and then we'll switch topics.
Okay. I mean, I was going to dive into something a little bit different too, but so I guess what I was going to say was, I guess, where do you guys see like the purpose of this, like DeFi technology? Is it like, are we trying to build? I don't know. Personally, I feel like I've just become very sort of skeptical of like cryptocurrencies personally, like especially like Bitcoin and Ether and stuff like that. But I'm still really interested in this notion of building like an open financial platform where people can like, almost block, like, and that's why I think things like Terra are really cool, where it's like, it's still just sort of using stable coins, but like making it so like I really like the programmable money aspect. And I think the programmable money should be still basically, the money that people already use, or, I would like to get more and more financial assets onto blockchains, whether it's like stocks and bonds and all sorts of things. So, I mean, I guess I know like Terra's view on this, but like, or maybe I'm wrong, but like, yeah, what do you think? What do you guys think is like, are you more on this like, like parallel financial ecosystem, or is it sort of a platform to build, just like sort of transfer existing financial system onto it?
I think this is very interesting discussion to be had. So I would say Terra very much in terms of both what we've built right now and also how we see the future of DeFi is in the second camp, in the sense that I think crypto in the early days has been very much, a playground of interesting ideas and, experimenting with brand new structures. The smart contract was a pretty novel construct that I think in that nature hadn't really existed in the past. And so I think, in the early phases, it was all about rediscovering things or coming up with brand new notions. I think moving forward, probably I think to get mass adoption and to make DeFi relevant outside of the crypto circles, I definitely agree with Sunny that we should find a way to integrate more mainstream finance to get people who have low exposure or understanding of how crypto works in the underlying sense, right? So people who don't understand what a private key is, I think making sure that they can use cryptocurrencies day to day, which is something that Terra has made core priority in how we do go to market and how we distribute. I'd say that's super important. Speaking of DeFi more particularly, and less so just generally in terms of adoption, I think finding a way to tie more traditional financial assets onto the constructs that we build on the blockchain, and also along a similar axis to get more interoperability between existing protocols, I think is very key. So interoperability, of course, has been a big theme. I think blending that with the interaction between the blockchain world and more mainstream finances is a very interesting direction. And so for us, one of the projects that we've kickstarted right now, still very much in research and development phase, is this thing that we call Anchor. And the basic idea of Anchor is, how do you tokenize cash flows from different crypto assets and also eventually real world assets in a way that can be tied to what Compound and Maker have already done as passive income instruments, right? So the idea of having a lending and borrowing market, which isn't just collateralized by Ethereum or Bitcoin, but actually can use real world assets as collateral and cash flows as collateral that may come from staking or may come from traditional assets. For example, being able to take a loan with equity as collateral, like stocks, and then using some of those dividends to pay back interest on that loan. I think that design space is very exciting, and it's been top of mind for us.
Awesome. Very cool. So hey, I have a question. We're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, narratives and like media. So there were a lot of narratives going on and stories, and then all of a sudden, anything that wasn't about coronavirus was just not a part of the conversation. Okay, and one of those things. Well, like you said earlier, Sunny, every meeting is now 5 minutes. It used to be 20 minutes talking about coronavirus. So now we're down to 5. But we were talking the other day, and you're saying, well, hey, there was a lot of talk about Cosmos and what was happening, but and then then everything hit with coronavirus. But now you guys have actually found a better way to work. And wondering if you can update people on the call today about what's going on with Cosmos and kind of help everyone hear the end of that story, because everybody's attention went only to coronavirus and we only heard the first act.
Yeah, sure. So, so within Cosmos, Tendermint, the Tendermint company has sort of been like the primary development company. And then basically like over the past like 3 months or so, there were sort of differences of vision of where people want to go. Jay, who is our CEO, he kind of like, I don't know, went on some sort of like wanted to take the company on certain tangents that not everyone really felt comfortable with. And due to that, a number of people sort of left the company. So Jay has this idea called Virgo, which he wants to sort of, I to be honest, I'm not sure I still fully understand it, but I think the best way I can express it is sort of, he wants to start working more on application layer stuff, where, I think a lot of the people who started working on Cosmos early on, like myself included, and we started working on it because we were just like very unhappy with the state of blockchain development. Like I hated writing Solidity, and so we started like we wanted to build. We had applications we wanted to build, but we didn't have the infrastructure to build them, and so that's why we started working on like Tendermint Core and the Cosmos SDK and IBC, and so now that stuff is sort of ready, I think now what we want to do is start like building more applications with it. And so Jay is really interested in building things like decentralized social networks and how to do like some project with the EU with like trying to get like digital cash and stuff, and so all sorts of things like that. And so I think then meanwhile it turns out that this kind of goes back to like the whole I think I was talking about the hub, like multiple offices thing, where I feel like there's always a little bit of divide between the SF and Berlin sides of the company. And so a large portion of the Berlin team, it turned out a lot of our engineers who were working on the, more core protocol stuff were based in Berlin. And so they kind of wanted to really focus still on like core protocol layer stuff. And so the companies, so they kind of split off into a new entity called Interchain GmbH. And then some like Zaki also left Tendermint, and so he's kind of continued working on core development through his validator company called Occlusion. And so essentially, the outcome of this, what essentially happened is, what's awesome is that no one really left the Cosmos community. We just sort of, the Tendermint company just sort of like splintered a little bit. And I think this is good in the long term because, if you look at any mature ecosystem, like you don't want to have one core development team. And so that's essentially what we have today. Now we have like, so Tendermint is still working on a lot of like, Cosmos SDK based stuff. You have Occlusion, you have Interchain GmbH, you have there's a company called Informal, which was started by Ethan Buckman. So we just sort of have a bunch of different companies that are sort of working on core development together. And so I think so for us, maybe our like work experience that was changed by COVID has actually really just been more overshadowed by this like new way of working of like, before everyone who was working on Cosmos core development was all in the same Slack group, like in the Tendermint Slack, and everyone was, it was just simpler. Now sort of GitHub repo management across companies and, communication across companies and funding. And so just like trying to figure all that stuff out has been sort of the main experience for us. And I think not being able to see each other in person, like, for example, Tendermint is trying to get its contracts with the Interchain Foundation for, development. And it's like, not being able to have face-to-face meetings to do that kind of stuff is it makes things more challenging. So I think it's sort of, that's sort of the main thing that's been going on.
I feel like that's definitely a positive, phase to the story a lot of people didn't get a chance to hear. So I thought that was cool. And when you think about, if we really want these protocols to live and grow and become decentralized organisms that don't have an owner, eventually that type of fragmentation supports that goal. So I wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the natural direction of a decentralized protocol. Sonny, I'm curious to hear how that has impacted protocol decision making and governance. So since you guys were a pretty tightly knit group and now it's sort of splintered off, but as you said, still all the core people are working, and everyone wants to keep pushing Cosmos forward. How has that affected governance and decisions?
To be honest, I don't think there's been sort of any major governance things, at least like sort of on-chain governance things since then. Sort of everyone's been very just focused on like getting IBC working and getting game of zones out the door. Some of the governance stuff is more around like back-end governance stuff. What I mean by that is like, the stuff I mentioned, like, okay, ownership rights over different repos and things like that. But, those stuff have sort of been basically figured out. And I think there hasn't been any governance issues yet. If everyone's just focused on IBC, maybe one day down the road there will be, and it'll be interesting, like, Ethereum and Parity, like, those eventually had like governance issues break out eventually. But, I think that's maybe a bit further down the road for us I'm sure it'll happen eventually. I'm sure in every single blockchain community, you eventually have governance issues. But I like Bob Summerwell's best thing for this of why all these why there's always these sort of splintering and governance fights that happen in almost any blockchain community you see, and it's because what we're building here is hyper trustless protocols. But who wants to build trustless protocols? People with trust issues. And yeah, so I think people in blockchain are just naturally kind of a little bit paranoid or really ideological, and sometimes you just end up disagreeing over minor things. One thing I would say that's very different in governance, to be honest, is before launch and after launch. So before we launched the Cosmos Hub, I remember we'd just get into debates about just hours long debates about things that for example, the memo size. So in the Cosmos SDK, I guess you're, as many of you are aware, but that's the case. You can put a memo, which is additional data you want to put in the chain. And we had this debate about should it be 500 bytes or 280 bytes? And we had this discussion lasted 3 days. And it's all those tiny minor things. I feel we don't actually really get into those kind of debates as much anymore after launch. I think after launch, it sort of just became more of focusing on longer term roadmap kind of things.
Okay, so one more question here. By the way, I'm really personally curious about that. Sunny, you and I have talked sometimes. SKALE network is launching very soon, and so we're right now we're hey, let's change this. But guess what? There's on-chain governance, and this is right now we get agility, but obviously there's less people building and working as it's pre-launch and post-launch. It becomes a different world, right?
Yeah, it's because before launch, the decision makers are the 20 people in the core development team. But once you launch, now your decision maker is this 200,000 person large community. And so some of the minor things that maybe didn't matter that mattered before, it's just not worth, you have to focus on the larger things.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking here at questions, and let's get into these because we're coming towards the end of the hour. So we have a question here from Mark. How will stable coins maintain liquidity and trust in a volatile global financial environment like we have today? So I don't know, Nick, do you want to take that first?
Yeah. So I think stablecoins are very sort of broad and amorphous category, right? So there's tons of different approaches, and I think how stablecoins will fare and how each type of mechanism will fare, I think, is very much a function of single points of failure and how direct the interaction is with the mainstream financial sector, right? So I think that looking at this from Terra's perspective, the fact that there is no core fiat reserve that is backing us. So we're quite different from, a Tether or Circle USD, means that stability is more so a function of, I would say, number one and most importantly, usage. So the fact that people use Terra for everyday transactions sort of means that insofar as demand for Terra as a currency has a foundation and is growing over time, the more strictly financial aspects of the peg actually matter less. And so I think finding use cases that basically have fundamental, where there's fundamentals behind them is definitely, I think, a very strong stability driver beyond the financial sense. I would say in the more strictly financial and protocol design sense, liquidity, so whenever a protocol has reliance on crypto markets, and for us that definitely is the case with Luna. So for those of you who don't know, so Terra is a decentralized stablecoin, and we have a stability mechanism that leverages Luna. which is the staking asset in order to maintain the supply of Terra at the right level, definitely their liquidity can be more of a concern, right? And so as global financial markets are facing liquidity crunches, as in particular crypto liquidity sort of varies over time, that side of things can be more tricky to manage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Baek, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, from the asset management perspective, I think there's two sides. So for the decentralized side and the institutional side, to start with the decentralized side, I think we're seeing emergence of more of a infrastructure that is focused on stablecoin liquidity, such as like Shell protocol and Curve protocol, not just dependent on the Uniswap that is for the general use cases. So performance and the bottlenecks are getting removed there. On the institutional side, I think in March, the USDC report said that they saw the biggest growth going from 450 million to 700 million. And we're seeing that even during this COVID turbulence, Grayscale also had their best quarter yet, having, I think, around 500 million fiat coming into their assets. So once these institutions and the asset managers in both decentralized world or the institutional world come into crypto already, stablecoin makes sense as the better tool to have better liquidity, but also management to remove that friction, which is still existing in the current crypto ecosystem, as in off-ramp and on-ramp.
That's interesting. And, one thing is I don't think anyone would have predicted that, or I'm sure someone would have, but we wouldn't have been able to diagnose that scenario 2 or 3 years ago. These things are happening as the industry matures. So it's interesting to be a part of the ride. So I've got a question here about what are we all working on. So I'm gonna reframe that a little bit and say, can everyone give let us know about something up and coming with your particular projects, and I know we talked a little bit about Anchor, but maybe you can give more insight on that, and Sunny and Baek, if you have any announcements as well, what are we working on? So what's exciting, what's up and coming?
So I can kick things off regarding Anchor and also another of our projects. So with regards to Anchor, I'd say the vision is how do we rethink passive income on blockchain and tie that into the process of borrowing and lending, right? And so starting with Luna, which is the staking asset on the Terra network and generates a yield, the core question was, okay, how do we let validators and Luna investors take loans on their Luna and use that staking yield as a way to pay back interest, right? So this raises interesting designs, including liquid staking. So being able to basically tokenize cash flows with the liquid staking token, and basically Anchor, as a summary, is a protocol that tries to put those things together and let people borrow and lend using tokenized cash flow assets such as liquid staking.
Awesome.
Yeah, so at Cosmos, I guess I can say what the Cosmos team is working on and then what I'm working on personally. So Cosmos team, we're kind of really focused on pushing towards IBC launch. The Game of Zones contest is starting in 2 days, I think. I think the registration is already over, but what that essentially is IBC. We have IBC working on the Cosmos SDK and sort of, in order to test it out, basically a lot of the projects who are building on the Cosmos SDK are everyone's sort of connecting their test nets together. And so people are spinning up testnet chains, and we're kind of making a little parallel Cosmos network where you can sort of do, and people will be trying to do different IBC transfers and developing new sort of protocols on top of IBC, and really just battle testing the software. So before we move it on, we start integrating into mainnets. So yeah, that's kind of what the sort of Cosmos team is basically be hyper focused on for the next couple weeks to months. And then me personally, I'm kind of working on some more researchy projects, more like I mentioned, on the application layer. And I've been doing a lot of stuff with like web of trust related stuff and how to do like under collateralized lending through webs of trust, and just looking, I just, like I said, I've just been really into this whole web of trust idea and like how to. I'm really into interledger protocol, which is, I think, is sort of how you can do like sort of a payments protocol using a web of trust style system. I've been thinking a lot about how to design new consensus protocols that don't use proof of stake, but instead use a web of trust to sort of achieve consensus. So yeah, so these are sort of the things that I'm thinking about,
Cool.
and where I think interesting stuff.
Nice. So you will you be publishing anything soon, or any work coming together soon?
Hopefully, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I have like sort of notes for, and I just need to like try to turn them into a paper or a blog post or something.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the web of trust lending stuff. There's a virtual event happening in a couple of days called DeFi Discussions, and so a lot of the under collateralized lending stuff, I'll actually be presenting it there. So if anyone wants to check that out.
Awesome. Okay, we will do that. Baek, anything, any updates from you?
Yeah, our main mandate has been always being that bridge between the crypto natives and the existing businesses in terms of go-to-market. So we've been pretty busy with helping out our existing portfolios on that. And for the long-term aspect, we started being more aggressive on working with some of the future partners for our portfolios. So mainly in the area of fintech and virtual entertainment. We see those two areas as easy steps to go from crypto native, like crypto economics and governance ideas, implement it into their already virtual setting and scalability of how their platforms grow. So a lot of those areas, it's a little harder being, not able to meet those teams in person, but we like that it's moving forward and the awareness of this technology and applications has been coming up.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll give a final update on SKALE. I think a lot of you know, we're pushing to mainnet launch. We're pushing hard. We still have a Q2 launch date, along with the Activate launch, which will initiate a proof of use mechanism. So the network will launch, a Dutch auction will happen, and then the token won't be listed on exchanges for 90 days. It's literally staking and yield and return happening only, as well as dApps being able to access the system. So it's a cool model. We're excited about it, but that's first and foremost in our world. So we're pushing hard for that. All right. So hey, Nick, Sunny, Baek, thanks for joining today. I think we got a lot of value out of this, and I know a lot of people watch this today, and a lot of people will watch it in the future. So want to say thanks again, and for all of you out there in TV land, thank you. And some of you are like us, and you're in lockdown still. So hey, keep the hair growing. Remember to prepay your barber or your stylist for a cut, and keep your chin up. Okay. All right.
Cheers. Take care, guys.
Thanks for hosting this. Thank you.
See you, everybody. Thank you.